Hello there, you're watching L24 News, streaming live from the capital Algiers, and to the headlines. President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, had a phone call with French President Emmanuel Macron on a number of issues, including the method of exfiltrating a citizen holding a dual Algerian-French nationality. The Spanish government admitted that it is negotiating with the Moroccan occupier on the management of the airspace of Western Sahara. As protests over pension reform continue to rock the country, King Charles of England, or rather of United Kingdom, visit to France has been postponed. On Friday, Lebanese depositors took to the streets in the country's capital as original employees launched an indefinite strike reflecting the sharp devaluation of local currency. Hello again and welcome. I'm your host Abdulrahim Kashor, and those were today's top stories. First, the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, had a phone call with French President Emmanuel Macron on a number of issues, including the method of exfiltrating a citizen holding a dual Algerian-French nationality by the French consular services in Tunisia last February. A statement by the Algerian presidency said that the two presidents agreed to strengthen communication means between the administrations of the two countries to avoid that such incidents happen again. The phone call also allowed for discussing ways to strengthen and enhance cooperation between the two countries, including the upcoming state visit that President Tebboune will pay to France, as well as regional and international issues of common concern. President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, again has exchanged Ramadan wishes with the Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, former Emir of State of Qatar, wishing him and all Qatarian more prosperity and progress for both peoples. The Algerian delegation to United Nations Human Rights Council affirmed that Algerian government will continue to deal positively and transparently with regard to all correspondence it receives from special procedures, reiterating Algeria's commitment to positive interaction with this mechanism within the framework of what it describes as a mutual trust.
My country's delegation encourages the special procedures to verify the credibility of the reports submitted prior to their official notification to the countries. We underline in this context that some parties continue to misuse this mechanism to serve political purposes with no relation to human rights. My country's delegation also calls for the special procedures to take into account the national judicial and legislative systems before issuing any opinion in this regard.
International human rights organizations have urged the United Nations to organize a self-determination referendum for Sahrawi people, protect them from Moroccan occupation violations, and halt a systematic looting of natural resources. Hassan Rakan.
Calls for justice for the Sahrawi people continue to grow as international organizations and the United Nations demand a self-determination referendum to be organized quickly. At the 52nd regular session of the Human Rights Council in Geneva, the Sahrawi delegation demanded protection for their people from Moroccan occupation violations and an end to the systematic plundering of their natural resources. Abdelbari Mustafa, a member of the Sahrawi delegation, emphasized the importance of the United Nations role in ending colonialism and establishing self-determination as a fundamental human right. He expressed concern over the continued occupation of Western Sahara and the UN's failure to organize a referendum on self-determination.
One of the important achievements of the United Nations in the 75 years since the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights has been its role in ending colonialism and establishing self-determination as a fundamental human rights principle. In this context, we are deeply concerned over the continuing occupation of Western Sahara and the failure by the UN to organize the referendum on self-determination for Western Sahara.
International organizations have warned of the worsening human rights situation in Western Sahara due to Moroccan occupation's repressive policies and illegal looting of natural resources. Mustafa urged the Human Rights Council to support human rights monitoring and the early organization of a self-determination referendum.
The Human Rights Council should act in support of human rights monitoring and the early organizing of a self-determination referendum in Western Sahara. Without justice, there will be no peace in the region and unescalated conflict in what this region needs least.
The international community has been called upon to intervene and put an end to Moroccan occupation of Sahrawi lands and to stop its repressive policies that involve arbitrary arrests, unfair trials, and imprisonment of Sahrawi human rights defenders.
The Spanish government admitted that it is negotiating with the Moroccan occupier on the management of airspace of Western Sahara, as the Makhzen seeks to violate the airspace of this latter with the complicity of government of Pedro Sanchez, which strays from Spain's historic position on Western Sahara conflict. Mohammed Khatou.
The Spanish government is progressing in its policy, deemed by its opponents as a historical deviation after it abandoned its neutrality towards the Sahrawi issue. Madrid has confirmed its negotiations with Rabat regarding the management of the airspace of Western Sahara, which is currently under the control of the Canary Islands. The government of Pedro Sanchez argued that the negotiations are part of the joint declaration signed last April in Rabat. However, the truth behind the bilateral negotiations came from the Spanish government in response to a question asked by Senator Fernando Clavijo of the Canary Islands Alliance.
Que efectivamente se está negociando.
In fact, there are currently negotiations taking place in the Canary Islands to transfer control of the airspace. We are currently negotiating to leave control of this space to the Moroccan government. We are still in the process of occupying international waters, and we are still betraying the Sahrawi people.
The possibility of transferring management of Western Sahara's airspace to the Moroccan authorities will respond, according to observers, to one of the demands of the Moroccan regime after 47 years of occupation of the territory. While the Spanish acknowledgement of the ongoing negotiations comes in the context of putting the blame on Sanchez for the change in the country's historical position on the Sahrawi file.
Still with Spain, the solidarity movement with the Sahrawi people in the Spanish region of Alicante organized a sit-in to denounce the shameful position of the head of the Spanish government, Pedro Sanchez, towards the Sahrawi question. The participants in the sit-in organized under the slogan, "No to the new betrayals, let the Sahrawi people decide for their destiny," called on the Spanish government to assume its legal, historical and moral responsibility regarding decolonization of Western Sahara, adding that United Nations should implement its decisions by enforcing the respect of international law and international legitimacy. The head of the United Nations support mission in Libya, Abdullah Batili, called on Libyan political leaders to agree on national solutions that would avoid further division and lead the country toward safety. Batili stressed that the only solution to achieve this lies is holding free and fair elections this year that restore legitimacy to institutions and put the country on the path to recovery, growth and prosperity. In a message addressed to Libyan people during the month of Ramadan, Batili called for inspiration from the holy month's values of tolerance, detachments from self-consideration, making concessions and meeting on one word for the sake of Libya and its people. Now, in France, amid some of France's worst street violence in years, French President Emmanuel Macron on Friday said he would press ahead with pension reforms. Macron added that the pension law, which the government pushed through parliament without a vote, would simply follow its course, which is now a review of its legitimacy by France's Constitutional Council.
Face aux violences que je distingue des manifestations,
In the face of violence which I distinguish from the protests, we continue to be extremely firm. On that topic, I condemn the violence we saw yesterday. I remind everyone of their responsibilities, and I reassure the law enforcement forces, who did exemplary work, of my full support. As to everything else, we continue to move forward. The country deserves that and needs it.
le pays le mérite et en a besoin.
Downing Street said that after a request by French President Emmanuel Macron, King Charles' state visit to France has been postponed. The British King was due to visit Paris and Bordeaux on Sunday. However, both cities were caught up in violence on Thursday, some of the worst since demonstration began in January.
It was going to be a great visit in different times. Now it jars with the angry mood in France. And of course, that anger is not directed at the King and Queen, it's directed at President Macron and his government. But nonetheless, they could have been caught up in it. And if there'd been embarrassing incidents during the visit of, I don't know, blockades or, things going wrong in the program because of the protesters and the demonstrators, we've all seen the pictures of the fires and so on in Paris.
In the same line of thought, more than 1 million people took to the streets of France against pension reform on Friday. Paris has witnessed the largest protest ever recorded, which turned violent, leaving several injured from protesters and security forces. Islam Seed.
Shattered windows, fires everywhere, and smoke covering the streets. This is the aftermath of the ongoing protests in France, which turned the country upside down for the 9th day in a row, leading to a state of anarchy. Almost 1 million people took to the streets across France. Hundreds of people were arrested, and several injuries sustained by protesters and security forces alike. French riot police on Friday tried to block workers on strike as they gathered in front of the Total Energies refinery in northern France to protest against the government's pensions reform. Labor unions fear that protests could turn more violent if the government does not pay attention to the growing popular anger over pension curbs.
As a matter of fact, the police intervened to dislodge the strike picket that was installed at the entrance of the company. We are not stopping them from going to work. Sorry, we are all the more alarmed that they have also extracted the fire brigade men who were having a break and smoking a cigarette outside.
In Marseille, French truckers staged a peaceful protest against pension reform and blocked the roads leading into the city's industrial port before the police arrival. Even rallies in support of French protests took place in Greece. Hundreds of Greek workers and French nationals gathered outside the French embassy in Athens to show support for striking workers in France.
We are telling to our French friends that we are all together, even in Greece, even in Italy. All Europe is behind them and we want to support them, and I think we can win this fight if we stay together and if we stay strong.
Most French people oppose raising the retirement age, but Macron has repeatedly said it was necessary to keep the nationwide pension program solvent. The latest wave of protests represent the most serious challenge to Macron's authority since the Yellow Vest revolt of discontented lower-income people 4 years ago.
To a different matter now, the Zionist occupation forces prevented Palestinians from entering Al-Quds through the Kalandia checkpoint on the first Friday of Ramadan. Citing security pretexts, Palestinian media sources reported that the occupation authorities prevented the entry of women and men over the allowed age, while the occupation forces attacked the Palestinian homes in Hebron and destroyed their contents. Protesters set tires on fire in front of Lebanon's central bank in Beirut on Friday and attacked several nearby bank branches to demand that they get their deposits blocked by local lenders since the economic meltdown in the small nation began more than 3 years ago. Nabil Khazini.
This is how an economic meltdown looks like now in Lebanon. These angry protesters came next to the central bank in Beirut to demand that they can withdraw their deposits blocked by local lenders. Amid the crisis, depositors have limited access to their savings after local banks imposed informal capital controls.
We have become poor. We don't have money to eat or live anymore. They either give us our money back or we will do a lot of things. I don't care about anything. I'm not married and I have no children. I will either be a killer or I will be killed. I want my money today. Otherwise, we're going toward a very, very, very dangerous escalation.
It's been now 1 year since Lebanon committed to reforms it has failed to implement. The International Monetary Fund warned that Lebanon was in a very dangerous situation. The economy has been crippled by the collapse of the currency, which has lost some 98% of its value against the US dollar since 2019, triggering triple-digit inflation, soaring poverty, and a wave of emigration.
Whether or not the lira can be salvaged depends on the political context, and the current political context of policy inaction, where there doesn't seem to be any intention to do anything to tackle the crisis. As long as this status quo persists, I do not see a serious likelihood, or any likelihood for that matter, that the lira will be salvaged. So as long as this current status quo persists, all what we could see is continuous dollarization at an accelerated pace.
Lebanon's banks have been restricting depositors' funds in foreign currency and putting harsh ceilings on withdrawing funds in lira following the unprecedented economic crisis in the country.
Igor Kirillov, chief of Russia's military, radiation, chemical and biological protection forces on Friday, criticized any use of depleted uranium munitions promised by the UK to Ukrainian forces. Russia has reacted furiously to plans outlined by Britain earlier this week to send shells containing depleted uranium to Ukraine.
I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the use of ammunition containing uranium does not have a significant advantage over tungsten shells in modern warfare. It should be noted that in armed conflicts, uranium ammunition was used exclusively by NATO countries.
Norwegian Prime Minister called for the acceleration of accession of Finland and Sweden to NATO. So stated that NATO members should feel obligated to approve the bid by Finland and Sweden to join the military alliance. The Turkish Parliament's Foreign Affairs Commission approved a bill ratifying Finland's bid to join NATO, effectively taking Helsinki another step toward membership of the Transatlantic Pact. The country Parliament's General Assembly still need to approve the bill and is expected to do so before it closes in mid-April, ahead of parliamentary and presidential election on May 14.
All allies should feel it as an obligation to follow up and do the proper ratifications. That being said, I agree with the Secretary General that Finland becoming member, and with all the guarantees and political messages being sent to Sweden and Finland in this interim period, secures the security situation in the Nordic region.
To Canada now, where US President Joe Biden and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau kicked off meetings in Ottawa on Friday after making a deal aimed at stopping asylum seekers from crossing the shared US-Canada land border via unofficial crossings. The agreement on Friday comes as Biden makes his first visit to Canada as president, wide-ranging Trudeau-Biden talks also were touching on the 30-month-old war in Ukraine.
Americans and Canadians are two people, two countries, in my view, sharing one heart. It's a personal connection. No two nations on earth are bound by such close ties, friendship, family, commerce, and culture.
Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador on Friday denied that parts of his country are controlled by drug cartels in response to recent comments made by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who said in a congressional hearing on Wednesday that it was fair to say that parts of the country were controlled by cartels instead of the government. In a news conference, the Mexican president denied such allegations, saying that there is no place in the country that does not have the presence of authorities.
Blinken had to unfortunately say that there are regions in Mexico controlled by the cartels. It's false. That's not true. There's no place in the country that does not have a presence from authorities. I can tell Mr. Blinken, and I think he already knows it, that we're constantly destroying clandestine laboratories in Sinaloa, in Sonora, everywhere.
According to North Korea's media reports on Friday, Pyongyang has tested a new nuclear-capable underwater attack drone that can generate a radioactive tsunami, as it blamed the joint military deals by South Korea and US for raising tensions in the region. The new North Korean drone cruised underwater at a depth of 80 to 150 meters for over 59 hours and detonated in waters off its east coast. Shocking figures revealed by United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, in its latest report on the situation of children in Yemen. UNICEF considered that the humanitarian crisis in Yemen is a result of an 8-year war, in addition to the economic collapse and the disruption of the social support system that affected basic services. According to a report, 11 million children need humanitarian assistance and millions of children are at risk of malnutrition and 8 million people need mental and social health services. Now, to the holy month of Ramadan, lanterns are one of the most well-known rituals in Egypt. Every year, Egyptians are keen to acquire such items to decorate houses, trees, shops, and balconies. It also gives children a special joy for the holy month and increases their belonging to our religion, Islam, and its traditions. And as we can see, though, the prices are not affordable for all categories within the Egyptian society, Cairo's shops are now lining up their best lanterns and decoration to welcome the holy month of Ramadan.
Definitely, the increase in prices this period has impacted the market and sales. Last year, the area was more crowded and you would not be able to walk. As you can see, prices are getting higher, so turnout is less compared to last year.
Lanterns are nice, but the prices are a bit high. They are the ones made in Egypt and lit with candles or with lamps. These ones are good, but their prices are also high. But in the end, it's a tradition, and we would like to celebrate.
France football national team overcome the Qatar final heartbreak as they hammer 4-0 in the opening game of their 2024 qualifying campaign. France began a new era with Kylian Mbappé as captain of the side. It was an era that started brightly with Antoine Griezmann opening the scoring sheet at the second minute of the game. Then, in less than 6 minutes, the lead was doubled by the defender Upamecano, and Kylian Mbappé added the third at the 21st minute, ending up the first half 3-0, adding the fourth goal by the new captain Mbappé again 2 minutes before the end of the game. To this end, ladies and gentlemen, thank you ever so much for being with us. For more updates, you can follow our social media platform. And all I can say at the end, has Horkum, and have a good night.